Hello, it's been a while since I've done any of these Headspace video things, so I thought probably better do one. I'm in Copenhagen and I'm out on the Sabbath tour at the moment, and let's give you a view out the window, which is very nice. It's a lovely hotel. We had a day off here yesterday, so I got myself settled in, and by settled in I mean just threw all my stuff everywhere. That's not a dead body, that's just a pair of jeans. So today we've got a show here. We're playing Copenhagen tonight, and but I've got about 4 or 5 hours before we have to head to the gig, so that is a good time to start doing this. Trying to work out how to play the run at the end of Fall of America. So the only way well, not the only way, but rather than just print out the score from Logic, if I write it down, I feel it goes in a bit better. It's a bit like when you're rehearsing for exams and stuff. So what I tend to do is just write it all out, not in a particular key, especially with that run. It just changes all the way through it. But this is my pad of just charting out all the songs, really. So there's Science Within Us, so kind of a brief kind of reminder. Yeah, it's a bit long, that song. So that one, Secular Soul, and Secular Soul. That's about as far as I've got so far. So I'll start just line by line and just practice it slowly. So I'll play through a bit of it, just like the first, I don't know, 6 bars of 10/8. What I tend to do with this particular run, because the jumps, Pete wrote it on guitar, so the jumps where he jumps up an octave, I play the first 2 phrases in the same place, just because the jump up the octave and then to start the next phrase here at that speed, at that tempo, is just nigh on impossible. So that's kind of what I do for the first 2 phrases. But let's play along and see if I don't drop the phone. So that's the first 6. Let's try and get the next bit. One thing I do find, if I'm at home or I'm trying to work from home or my studio or whatever, there's the phone ringing or some distractions, it gets very frustrating. So when you're away and you have the isolation of there's not actually anybody here to disturb you, you find yourself trying to create your own distractions. I think it's an attention kind of deficit thing where you can't concentrate on something for too long, which is handy because we've got a coffee machine over there. So what I'll do is I'll just keep making coffee. But one point I did want to say, if I turn this camera round, is when I'm writing, if I'm writing score stuff out, as I said before, I could just print out the score from here, but it goes in a bit more permanently if I write it out. It's sort of a bit like going back to school and when you're writing you know, notes out for essays and stuff like that. But and for me, if I was writing it out for a string quartet, obviously I'd have to write it out in the right keys and all the rest of it. But for me, what helps me work really quickly, for example, that is not necessarily the best way to write that phrase with a C, a B flat, an F sharp and an F natural. Maybe for ease it would be better to write it with say a C, a B flat, a G flat, and then an F. But for me, for whatever reason, that makes more sense to me if I'm looking at it quickly and trying to learn it quickly, because this is a bit like cramming for an essay or something. So I don't actually get that much time to learn this sort of stuff. And we haven't played it for about 3 or so, 4 years or so, and in that time, obviously I've played a lot of other gigs with other people, and my brain doesn't work as well as it used to. Which is actually quite an interesting point. One thing I have noticed as I've got older is my long-term memory is still really good. So I could actually probably step in and do a gig with Atomic Kitten from 20 years ago without really having to look at any of the notes. Whereas 2-3 years ago, memory's not so good, so I have to cram a bit in. Plus with the Headspace stuff, it's like we do so few shows. It's kind of you learn it, and literally once you finish that gig, you kind of almost store it in a different part of your brain because you know you're not going to need it for a while. So that's definitely happened with this stuff, certainly from the I Am Anonymous album. Anyway, God, this is getting a bit dull, isn't it? So I better do some more playing or something, or make a coffee. Actually, this run in particular is a bit of a bitch to play. Thanks, Pete. As I say, Pete wrote this run on guitar, so what falls under the fingers on guitar often doesn't fall under the fingers on the keyboard. So in slow, this pattern is so the temptation is to go, but then you run out of fingers. Anybody that has had piano lessons and you learn your scales and the fingering of the scales, when it doesn't fall under the fingers, it's like going against what you feel is natural. So this, I'm actually sliding down from the thumb from the B flat. So that's going to take a little bit of practice, that one. Need my glasses for this bit. One thing that I always try and do is break things into sections when you're learning stuff, because otherwise it just gets too overwhelming, especially with like this sort of run at the end of an already 13-minute piece. So for example, this run here that plays itself twice, an octave apart, then starts the really long run, which is the last 2 lines of this here. That bit there, I'm going to break down into 2 parts. So the first phrase in the same octave to make it a bit easier. So that's the kind of much slower speed. And the way I kind of remember stuff is kind of patterns, really. So I'm remembering there's like anchor points for me on that particular run, where it goes down, and then this is a little pattern, da 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 da, and then da da da. So you got that same kind of pattern from the C and on the G. So you got. And then on to the next bit. Okay, trying to work out how to do this without any friends to hold the camera. That final kind of run, really slow, is... but fast, it's a fucking nightmare. See, it's not worth editing this out, because this is basically what I'm going to be doing for the next half an hour. Something like that. So there we go. I hope that's been of some interest to somebody. So that's my finished crib notes there. So I will just have a little play at that over the coming sort of few weeks, and that's just under a minute's worth of the 90-minute Headspace set. So yeah, I can get rid of all other information from my head once we get at the end of this European leg of the Sabbath tour. But for now, it's time for Definitely time for one of those. Or maybe one of those. One of those. No, definitely one of those. Definitely not. It's not one of those. One of those.